Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Gross. So this is the time of year where we set the hearing for the budget for fiscal 2020. As a part of that process, we have a presentation. I'll run through some things. If anybody has on the council has questions or additional things they'd like addressed, just let me know. So this is the budget for the fiscal year 2020 that runs from 7/1/19 to 6/30/2020 in the way of highlights, goals, and challenges. So the proposed property tax rate in this proposed budget is unchanged for the 10th consecutive year. It does include, this proposal, a sewer rate increase to fund future citizen needs. The goals of the budget, as always, are to pass a balanced budget, maintain the property tax rate when possible, maintain sufficient fund balances, all while providing high-quality public services. The challenges are, of course, as we all know in our home finances as well, costs generally rise. We want to provide services to our citizenry at economical cost levels, and we need to plan for future needs in the budget. Any budget discussion has to involve a little bit of property tax explanation. So a little bit about that. Property in Iowa is, under state law, categorized into property classes. There are 6, and they are listed there from residential, commercial, industrial, agricultural. The new one, as of FY17, a couple years ago, is multi-residential. Think multifamily housing. And there are growth limitations imposed on each class to, in theory, eliminate dramatic tax shifts between the classes. That growth limitation results in a reduction of the assessed value called a rollback. The value's rolled back to a smaller number before the tax rate is applied to it. That rollback changes every year for various classes. So here's a comparison and a change column for fiscal year 20 that we're budgeting for and fiscal year 19 that we are in. So residential in the coming fiscal year will increase from 55 and 62 cents to 56.92 approximately. So that's $1.29 or 1 1/3%. Multi-residential is on a stair-step decline under statute until it ends up being the same number as the plain residential rollback. Commercial and industrial are at 90% unless and until there would be some action on the legislature's part. And ag is tied to residential as well, but is a slightly different number. But those two move in tandem. So a residential property assessed at a hypothetical $100,000 in Coralville, on that property, the taxable value for FY20 will increase almost $1,300. So if you multiply that $1,300 of higher taxable value times the constant tax rate at the city of Coralville under this proposal, the property tax paid to the city would increase $17.55 year over year. As a point of reference, in the year we're in, it was $17.34 lower than the prior year. So for residential property taxpayers, they're going to see an increase due to the rollback change next year versus this year. But this year, they saw a decrease of very much like amount versus the prior year, again, because of changes in the rollback. For commercial and industrial property, the rollback stays at 90%. The city's proposed tax rate is still the same tax rate, so the property tax paid by the property owner would remain the same year over year. It's been a few years ago, but I'll remind everyone of the commercial property tax reform legislation of 2013. The reason that I would even mention this at this many years later is when it rolled back commercial and industrial property values from 100% to 90% over 2 fiscal years in 5% steps. The state entered into an agreement to provide replacement payments to local governments, including cities. There's no sunset to the legislation, and it's a standing appropriation. It's important to cities because those revenues go in the general fund. They flow to the debt service fund, TIF funds, and the employee benefits fund. So anything paid out of any of those funds, which is just about everything, that's property tax paid for a city, is in part paid by that replacement payment made by the state to cities under its agreement from back in 2013. The city's property tax levy has 5 components: the general fund levy, the tort or insurance levy, a transit-specific levy, trust and agency or employee benefits levies, and the debt service levy. And here's a listing of the proposed rates in FY20 and FY19. On this slide, I could have just said same, because they are all the same. Sometimes, even if the total tax rate for the city is the same, there might be shifts between components, but this year the proposal is the same tax rate for each of the levies. So then, to zoom out a little bit or widen the lens and look at a typical Coralville property owner's total property tax bill, here's a listing of property tax rates by taxing entity for someone living in Coralville and within the Iowa City Community School District part of Coralville. I've highlighted the row that is Coralville's tax rate, the $13.5277 per thousand of valuation. The other taxing entities are listed, but the total and the tax rates I've got here are the city's proposed rate for 20, the other body's actual FY19, because they're in the process of setting their coming year rate, and so we don't necessarily know what those are. Here's a pie chart with the same information. So it gives you a feel for the proportion of the average taxpayer's bill, what's going to which taxing entity. And there are a few very small slivers at like the Ag Extension, State of Iowa, the assessor levy, but by and large, the bulk of it is the school district, the city of Coralville, and Johnson County. So the general fund is the city's chief operating fund, and among the revenues and resources coming into that fund are property and hotel motel tax. Those are a couple of the largest taxes. License and permit fees, for instance, building or rental housing permits and inspection fees. Interest or rental of property, use of money and property is the state statutory term for that. Intergovernmental revenues, so grants or payments under contracts from other governmental entities or the state or the federal government. Charges for services like signing up for T-ball at the rec center or something like that, or soccer. And then there's a sort of a catch-all of other financing sources and miscellaneous, which is borrowings or interfund transfers or the like. So the estimated revenue for fiscal year 20 is projected at 28 million, just a hair over 28 million for the general fund. And that's about a 2% increase from FY19's budget level. And the general fund supports all the functions paid from the general fund: public safety, so fire, police, animal control, health, social services, culture, recreation, community development, general governmental costs like administration and planning, and then there are always those catch-alls, contingency or miscellaneous. To break up that a little over 28 million of projected general fund revenues, we have a listing on this slide that shows, and you can see far and away the largest one is property taxes and excise taxes. And then a little way down the list, we have hotel motel tax at about 3 million. At 11%, that's a bigger proportion of Coralville's budget than it would be in many towns or cities, and it's certainly large on a per capita basis for the city of Coralville. And then proposed general fund departmental expenditures are on this slide. Park and Rec, police, fire, animal control, and on down the list. You'll notice that, and it may seem odd at first, contingency, transfers, and other is number 3, which probably seems, you don't expect an other category to be way up the list. That would be the net TIF release that we're often talking about from the mall TIF beginning in the current fiscal year and each year thereafter. That's a significant proportion of that line item. And then outside the general fund, we have special revenue funds like the road use tax fund or the streets department. State road use tax monies are allocated by population. So our 2010 census is the number that gets used. This projection is actually flat year over year, which is not the norm, but DOT is providing guidance, and as they do every year, but this year they're providing guidance that does not show an increase for FY20 over FY19. So we're hopeful that there will be a higher number, but what we usually do is budget at the DOT guidance level, and that's $121.50 per capita. Someday when we have another census and the population is higher, that total revenue number will go up from that as well. We also have enterprise funds. We're proposing no change in user rate structure for any of the enterprise funds, but for listed at the bottom, the sewer treatment plant improvement project. Since we got bids for that and we're able to run the final numbers, we believe one more year, FY20, of increase will be necessary there. And if we take that user rate change and examine that for a moment, the minimum fee of $12.50 would go to $13.75 under this proposal, and then each additional 100 cubic feet measured off the water meter usage would go from $4 per 100 cubic feet of water to $4.40. And this bar chart shows that for what is an industry standard for a 3-bedroom house residence on a national basis. So the water and sewer industry kind of uses this as a typical residence. So we've put it in those terms on this chart. Here's an overview of all of the enterprise funds. There's a couple things to note here. One, the second column or the second row, wastewater, is very large compared to what you would normally expect there. That includes a big part of the construction project that's currently going on at the wastewater treatment plant. And then there are 2 footnotes that indicate where we might have expenditures that are higher than revenues, why that might be. And the basic reason is when we have grant matches made out of reserves, so money we've saved up over time, and we're using that for a grant project or for some sort of capital purchase or equipment replacement. So it may not be in current year revenues, but from prior year revenues, we've saved that money up. So a little bit about timing and additional information. The Connection City Magazine is scheduled to appear soon on the website and in mailboxes. It's got an article on the budget near the back, and on February 26th at 6:30 p.m. we'll have the public hearing that we're setting at this meeting. And then on March 12th will be the planned city final vote on the budget. We'll file it on the 15th, and it'll be effective beginning July 1st. And you can get an overview on our website beginning tomorrow. I never like to post this till we've gone through this process with the city council and the mayor, or in paper copy at City Hall or the public library, again on the Connection magazine, and on Coral Vision as well.